Okay, I want you to imagine for a second that you've just fallen down a weird witch's wormhole, tumbling through the space-time continuum, and suddenly, boom, you land smack in the middle of ancient Egypt. But we aren't just talking about any era here. We're spawning right into the iconic New Kingdom. This is the absolute height of Egyptian power and influence, and luckily for our research purposes today, it's the most heavily documented. So here's the ultimate question we're diving into in this explainer. Could your modern, well-fed, 21st century gamer build actually survive this historical run? Welcome to the Ancient Egypt Survival Run, New Kingdom Edition. Let's see if you've got what it takes.
Now, to figure out if you can actually survive, we first have to establish exactly where you're starting in the game of life. Since you've made it far enough right now to understand the words coming out of my mouth, I'm going to safely assume that you are not a literal, mouth-breathing, fragile infant. And honestly, you should give yourself a massive pat on the back for that. Why? Because you've already bypassed the absolute hardest part of this ancient survival game, childhood. Just making it out of the womb and through those early years was a brutal, brutal filter in the ancient world.
The reality was honestly pretty stark. Being a kid back then wasn't just tough, it was literally a coin flip. They didn't have any of our fancy beeping medical machines to hook moms up to and keep premature or sick babies alive. Because of this, infant mortality rates were staggeringly high. A grim 20 to 50% of babies didn't even make it out of the womb, or they didn't survive their earliest days. I mean, some of these kids were so frail you could practically see their blinking low health bar. So look, just by showing up to this timeline as an adult or a teenager, you have already skipped the most lethal level. But hey, surviving childhood just means you get to face the next big threat, which is hunger. Let's take a look at the survival diet you'd be subjected to as an average kid helping out the family. Your basic peasant diet, basically whatever mama and papa could scrape together, consisted of half a raw onion, a piece of hard dry bread, and a cup of warm milk. Yikes, right? Sounds pretty disgusting. But that is the early level fuel keeping you alive. Now, if you were lucky and your papa had a really high fishing level, he could bring home a massive, sweet catfish from the river. That right there is the premium protein you desperately need to build up your stats.
And your life was entirely dictated by your circumstances. So let's figure out where you actually fit into the grand scheme of society here. Ancient Egypt operated on a super strict hierarchy. The rich and powerful guys were at the top, and everyone else was at the very bottom. So honestly, not too different from the modern world. At the absolute top is the head honcho, the divine pharaoh. Whatever he says, goes. Right beneath him are his closest advisors and bros, followed by the educated middle class. And all the way at the bottom we have the laboring lower class. This includes servants and slaves, which were typically made up of foreign prisoners of war.
Now, here is where your playthrough hits a major snag. You just fell out of a wormhole, right? You're surrounded by a well-tanned population speaking a completely different language. Because you can't speak what is essentially ancient Wingdings 3 to them and you stick out like a sore thumb, there's a 95% chance you'd be immediately captured and sold into slavery. Tough break for an outsider. However, let's assume you managed to roll a really high charisma stat and somehow convince the xenophobic guards that you're just one cool dude. Congratulations, you avoided the slave market, but you still need to eat. Which means it's time to get a job. And to do that, you've got to prove your worth through manual labor. With over 90% of all ancient Egyptians working as farmers, agriculture is officially your new main quest line. There's plenty of room to make friends, form rivalries, and see who can grow the best onions. The application process is actually super simple. You just move a heavy rock from over here to over there. Boom. With your stellar modern gamer build, you get the job easily. Just remember to lift entirely with your back.
Your new absolute best friend is the Nile River. It's your #1 source of delicious brown water for your crops. Just, maybe don't taste test it. Now, because the Persians haven't invaded yet to introduce proper coinage currency, you aren't working for gold here. You are paid in literal bread and sandy beer. For months on end, you'll be slaving away at your buddy Bakir's wheat farm. You eat your brown bread, wash it down with sandy beer, and sleep on a filthy, crusty, dusty dirt floor. You spend your days swinging your copper sickles, dreaming of the modern comforts you left behind, all while dodging the very real snakes that literally want to bite your ankles.
But the farming grind eventually hits a pause. One day, you notice the ground getting incredibly moist. The Nile is flooding. After you fight off the invading river rats with your +7 strength copper sword, your farming gig is temporarily suspended. The river is doing its thing, which means it's time for a seasonal job pivot. Oh look, the pharaoh wants you to help build a new pyramid. Lucky you.
But hey, since you likely have countless hours placing virtual cobblestone blocks in video games, this whole construction gig sounds like an absolute breeze.
But listen, daily manual labor isn't your only worry. You've got a 21st century wrinkle brain, so you know you need to stay clean to prevent disease, right? So you decide to take a refreshing dip in the Nile to wash off the dirt. Unfortunately, you bathe just downstream of the town laundry, which happens to be downstream of the town's dumping grounds.
Uh-oh.
You just picked up a horrific status effect, schistosoma. This is caused by a parasitic flatworm that crawls right up inside you, and it brings on a terrible fever and, even worse, aggressive diarrhea. In ancient times without modern medicine, this is a massive, massive drain on your health points.
And little wriggling worms aren't the only environmental threats out there. You also have to dodge trending, run-ending diseases like tuberculosis, first edition smallpox, and malaria. These are incredibly popular, high-damage diseases that would ensure your stay in ancient Egypt is a very, very quick one. If you want to survive, you had better use that wrinkle brain to relentlessly swat the local mosquitoes and yell at your neighbors to cover their coughs for Ra's sake.
Somehow, miraculously, you manage to survive the diseases. You get back to chiseling massive sandstone blocks for the pyramid, and suddenly, you catch the pharaoh checking you out. He admires your strong physique, your careful attention to hygiene, and most importantly, your glistening back sweat. He's also heard tales of your epic conquering of the river rats. He's incredibly impressed by these qualities and decides they are exactly the traits he needs for a soldier. Ding! You just leveled up. You've been bumped up a few societal ranks and drafted into the military. The pharaoh wants to expand his empire, and guess what? You're going to war.
Now, being a soldier just means swinging a sword at bigger rats, right? Well, let's open up the ancient armory and check your weapon loadout. First up, we have the Kopesh. This is a wildly cool curved sword that is highly slashy, and boy does it hurt. But if swinging a curved blade isn't really your style, you can opt for the spear or the javelin. This is a bit less slashy and a lot more stabby. It's perfect for poking an enemy from slightly further away while still being close enough to witness their defeat.
But what if you really don't want to be anywhere near the front lines? Well, you've got one more option, the simple and sweet bow and arrow. This weapon is specifically designed for players who have the urge to stab someone from at least a few thousand scarabs away. It's safe, it's reliable, and it never fails. Well, unless you miss, of course.
So, you're armed, you're trained, and you're stepping out onto the sandy battlefield to fight for a country you literally just fell into. Who exactly is the final boss of this run? Well, the enemy of the day is a mysterious faction known only as the Sea Peoples. No one really knows exactly who they were, but they likely originated from somewhere north of the Mediterranean. And their grand crime against the divine pharaoh? They've been flaunting their incredibly stupid-looking boats near Egyptian shores for the absolute last time. It is officially on.
The battle begins, and it instantly turns into a chaotic series of quick-time events. You narrowly avoid an attack, respawn, let's try that again. You dodge an incoming arrow, pull back your own bowstring, and fire. It's a beautiful shot with a perfect arc and stable flight, landing right on target. You just defeated an expendable enemy NPC. Great job taking out a guy who had absolutely no complex backstory or family he was fighting to protect. To him, you were the terrifying invader boss, but hey, war is hell.
You keep popping off shots, raining arrows across the battlefield, feeling like an absolute ancient warrior legend. But then, out of your peripheral vision, you notice something. Actually, scratch that. Not something, someone. You turn and say, "Oh, hey, Bach here. It's your buddy from the wheat farm." He looks totally confused. He didn't know you were a soldier. And suddenly, your eyes shoot open. Thank God, you look around at the filthy dirt floor and the copper sickle. It was all just a dream. You're still just a humble farmer, completely safe from the Sea Peoples, but still very much trapped in the New Kingdom.
So what does this all mean for us? The crucial takeaway is this. Surviving ancient Egypt requires dodging insane infant mortality rates, surviving parasitic riverworms, swinging heavy sickles for sandy beer, and hoping the pharaoh doesn't draft your sweaty back into a brutal, historical war. It is an incredibly punishing survival run. But history is vast, and there are countless other servers to join, which begs the question, if you fell down another wormhole tomorrow, what historical era will you spawn into next?